Hello YouTube. As you might know, I lead a tireless crusade against the black pill and every and any notion of demoralization because I believe it to be the plague of the century. The idea that you are doomed at birth is extremely destructive and it must be dealt with. But with my years on the internet, especially around fitness spheres, I've noticed that there is a demographic that seems to have it much worse than the rest of us. And that demographic is Asian men. For some reason, there is that notion circulating around that if you are born Asian, you are doomed to an existence of weakness. You are never going to get big, you're never going to have big muscles, all of your efforts will be for nothing because you are born inferior. In this video, I aim to entirely destroy that myth for my Asian subscribers and brothers out there to help restore your spirits and guide you on the rightful path of effort. But most importantly, even if you're not Asian, I hope that with this video, I'm going to help you kick every single attempt at demoralization, demotivation, in a sense, every single self-limiting belief that other people are going to try and push on you and that are going to damage your life. But first, I believe it proper for us to try and find the origin of these self-limiting beliefs. Because if we are to cure the disease, we have to diagnose the disease, and so we have to find where it came from. So we're going to start with a small lesson in history, nothing too complex or cumbersome, but just so you understand where that comes from, because keep in mind that if we go back in time, Asians were not born with the innate idea of their inferiority in mind, actually quite the opposite. If you peruse writings from, for example, from Chinese generals, from the multiple Chinese empires, you will see that they never believed themselves to be inferior. If anything, they touted their superiority. And it is the same for the samurai. Go read Miyamoto Musashi, go read any of these great samurai, these great men. None of them had these self-limiting beliefs. None of them believed themselves to be inferior. They were quite prideful men. They knew what their worth was, and they also believed in their own innate greatness and the greatness of their race. This has been damaged. This ability to believe in the self has been damaged at some point. And when exactly did that occur? Well, to me, I pinpoint the apparition of the sick men of Asia trope around the time where European invasions started to become more prevalent, in a sense, when colonialism started to become a way for European countries to expand their influence, make more money, etc., etc. And all of that started, of course, with the Opium Wars. If we have to pinpoint one historical event, with Britain dominating the Chinese government, winning tours back to back so as to open the Chinese frontiers and allow opium to go back and forth so as to make more money for their country and their countrymen, and so as to be able to sell the opium directly to the Chinese men and people, which, as you might know, resulted in addiction, hence the term sick men of Asia. This is where it originally came from. The term sick men of Asia will come back times and times again because you will see that, believe it or not, this was only the beginning, because after this, there was a long list of historical events where a European power invaded an Asian country, took over their government, and destroyed the pride of the people. I can cite, for example, the takeover of India by the British East India Company in 1608, to the creation of Indochina. I don't want you guys to believe that it's only the Brits. The French also did this. In 1887, we went and we just took the land for ourselves with Napoleon, because we defeated the Chinese and so we took land from them. I'm not blaming my ancestors or the European powers at the time, I'm just stating facts here. And then, of course, the most obvious one and the most quote-unquote recent one, the two atomic bombs that were dropped on Japan in 1945, which entirely eradicated their pride. They had to relinquish their katanas. It's something that I saw recently. The ultimate humiliation where they had to surrender the weapons of their ancestors. And the Americans tossed them away. They didn't even conserve the weapons. It was just an ultimate way to completely shatter the pride of the Japanese men by telling them, hey, the samurai epoch is over and you are now surrendered entirely. You have no claim to your own country whatsoever. And naturally, these consecutive defeats created a stereotype, which was that Asian people in particular were often inferior race and that they were incapable of governing themselves, because clearly, since they kept losing to foreign powers, it meant that they completely lacked the ability to govern themselves. And from this humiliation was born the inferiority complex that I was describing earlier in the video. I believe that this is the origin of the disease, a disease that still subsists to this day. If you look at Western countries, for example, East Asians and Indian males perceived as more feminine. And this has very severe implications. For example, levels of frustrations, because any Asian man, any Indian man who lives in a Western country will tell you that it's extremely difficult to date within your race, but also outside of your race, because you are perceived as less than other men. You are compared, for example, with Western or African men, which are perceived by people and women in particular as much more masculine than you. And so in the common consciousness, you are seen as inferior. And this has led to the boom of Asian incels, because you might not know that, because the media keeps reporting only a certain demographic of incels, aka white incels, because they have an agenda. But in reality, the majority of incel forums are populated by East Asians and Indian teenagers, for the reasons I just explained. They perceive themselves as inferior, they have to deal with this inferiority complex, and the way that they deal with it is by rejecting society as a whole, hating women, etc., etc. I'm not here to blame them, I'm just here to tell you about the situation we have to deal with. This is a symptom, and the symptom comes from this. It comes from an inner weakness, that stems directly from the notion that Asian men are sick. They are the sick men of Asia. And even though we no longer really use that moniker, it's now mostly used to talk about politics and countries that struggle with their economy or with even their government at some level or the other. It has now fused and morphed into a different term. On the internet now, we talk about bug men. This is the new slur for Asian men and Asian people in general. And the idea is that Asian people have no passion, they have no creativity, they have no virtue or drive, they're just bugs. Ants that just follow along, that need a strong government to guide their lives, because without the government they are nothing, and they have no real identity whatsoever. From sick men to bug men, the equation remains the same. It is still the notion that Asian men in particular are inferior. And of course, none of that is based on reality. All of this is just the result of historical events that cascaded to the situation that we have to deal with nowadays. But it doesn't change the fact that these stereotypes are pervasive and they can easily destroy your life if you let them stick. But the interesting thing is that nowadays, if you look up the term, it is vastly utilized by Asian people themselves to describe their own people, to describe their own cultures, to describe each other. How is it possible? Well, I'll tell you exactly why. It's because these people have internalized the stereotype, and now they have bought into the lie. They have bought into the lie of their own inferiority. Just again, recently, to prepare for this video, I was watching a video of just Chinese people on the street that were asked questions about white people. And I was quite saddened to see that Chinese people had bought into the lie that they were inferior. And times again, when they were asked, oh, do you believe that white people are better looking? Do you believe that they're superior? They said yes. And you know, when you see a people reduced to that level of shame, that has lost pride in themselves, it is quite sad. Be it their history or society tells them that they are. And it's extremely hard to resist that type of influence. But I want to make clear that it is up to you to do so. Because the real danger of all of this propaganda is not the hatred that was created in the heart of Asian people against white people. I'm not interested in that today. What matters is the self-hatred that was bred there, because the self-hatred, as I said, is still very prevalent, to the point that now Asian people are the first ones to promote these self-limiting beliefs amongst themselves. And I've seen that a lot online, because I have a fitness channel and I have a lot of Asian subscribers. Times and times again, I have Asian men who come to my channel, who come to my comments, and who whine and complain and bemoan their genetics. They say, oh, I'm born Asian, therefore I'm inferior, I'm never going to be able to be big like you, I'm never going to be able to build muscle. And that's what they do. They complain. They complain about something that was never true. They complain about a lie that was passed down onto them and that they then reinforce and they feed, which in a sense is quite similar to the pattern that you notice with short men. Short men function the exact same way. They were told a number of lies and of stereotypes about short men, and instead of rejecting them outright, they accepted them, and then they become the number one types that actually promote them. Because most of manlet hate and most of short men hate comes from short men themselves. Same for Asian hate. I'm not going to claim that there's no hatred for Asians outside of Asian groups, but a lot of it comes directly from these groups. It is self-generated, it is self-hatred. So again, even though the historical influence that has led to these stereotypes isn't your fault, accepting them as fact and resigning yourself to a fate of your own making is. In the wise words of Bruce Lee, we are not sick men. I know that Bruce Lee is a controversial figure and some people claim he was a faker. We don't care about that today. Something that is lesser known about Bruce Lee is that he was quite invested in the restoration of Asian pride, not just Chinese pride, Asian pride. Because he perfectly understood what I just explained. He understood that there was a problem with Asian identity. And he was a big figure in the 70s and 80s of hope. Because he showed Asian men that, yes, you are masculine. Yes, you have what it takes to impose yourself and to not be a victim. And he made a big change. The change was not enough, clearly, because we're still dealing with the problem, but he ignited a flame, and that flame was the idea that you must reject that notion of sickness. In the movie, if you've watched the movie at some point, Bruce Lee runs into a sign that says, no dogs, no Chinese people, and that sign is put on a restaurant. And that was, again, back then when China was seen as a nation of sick men, because they got dominated by Europeans, then they got dominated by Japan, they had no sovereignty of themselves, they couldn't govern themselves, and so they were seen again as an inferior race. And Bruce Lee showed up and said, that is not true. We are not defined by our historical defeats, we are not defined by the state of our army, we are defined by who we are and our willingness to fight. And he was willing to fight, he was willing to show that he was not sick and his countrymen were not sick either. And this is exactly the type of mindset that you must embrace to reject this self-imagined shame and prove your worth to yourself, because words have no values. Until you can prove to yourself that you are not a sick man, then you will not be able to believe it. So the best way to do that is to develop your body. It's to pick up weights, it's to start lifting, or it's to do martial arts. Believe me, 100% of Asian men who think that they are destined to stay small and weak forever and that they are inferior have never tried to become better in the first place. Those who have tried know that all of this is a bunch of bullshit. All of this is a bunch of lies. And thankfully, you have a wealth of historical figures to draw from if you need inspiration. Asian men who never wasted 1 second thinking about genetics or self-limitation and who set out to accomplish great things. Again, you have Bruce Lee, if it's someone that you actually resonate with, follow his example and prove to yourself and to the world that you are not a sick man. But there are other legends out there. For example, one of my favorite and someone that I look up to is Mas Oyama, who was nicknamed the God of War, who is a master of karate, who, if you didn't know, for example, at some point sent 3 of his black belts to Thailand to fight Muay Thai practitioners, and they came back victorious. This is how serious his form of karate was, that it could compete with a sport as lethal as Muay Thai. And Mas Oyama actually came up with a number of mottos, 11 mottos actually, and I believe them to be extremely beneficial to help you break free from your self-limiting beliefs. Now, I'm not going to read all of them. I recommend you actually go and look at all of them, but I'm only going to read to you the ones that are the most relevant in my opinion. And we're going to start with motto number 2. So motto number 2 goes as follows. Following the martial way is like scaling a cliff. Continue upwards without rest. It demands absolute and unfaltering devotion to the task at hand. The black pill in particular, and all levels of self-hatred, demand that you do nothing about it or demand that you give up quick. Those who give up never prove to themselves that they are worth something in life. You must see it as scaling a cliff. You cannot stop. There is no break, or else you will fall off the cliff and you will convince yourself that you never had what it took to actually climb the cliff in the first place. That would be a lie. You must be entirely devoted to the task at hand. You must train. Then there is motto number 3. Strive to seize the initiative in all things, all the time guarding against actions stemming from selfish animosity or thoughtlessness. This one is key because a stereotype that is extremely prevalent amongst Asian men is that Asian men are passive, they are herbivorous in nature, they are non-aggressive, they are meek, they are timid. This is destructive because it stunts your social skills, it stunts your ability to connect to others and to women, and most importantly, it stunts your ability to develop yourself. You are climbing up, you are not expanding. To be a man is to expand your power. So follow this motto. Always take the initiative. Always take the chance to become a better person. If you always shy away from things because you are afraid, you will never grow, and then you will actually become what people tell you that you are, which is a sick man. Now let's look at motto number 5. The martial way is centered in posture. Strive to maintain correct posture at all times. Respect is key. And I believe that one of the great things that Asian cultures have in common is the notion of respect. Unfortunately, in this world, some people perceive and interpret respect as weakness. You cannot bow all the time. Sometimes you have to stand tall and you have to actually puff up your chest. You have to show people that you mean it. This is the posture. Strive to maintain that posture at all times. This will teach you a very important lesson, that you're worth something. If you let people run all over you, like again, I grew up in the Chinese district of Paris, I had a ton of Asian friends, and what I saw times and times again is that they were passive, meek, and they let people run all over them. I have the vivid memory of a friend of mine, Mikael, great dude, who times and times again let people take money from him. He would buy them food and all of that because he wanted to be nice and respectful. Fuck that. You do not need to be respectful to people who do not respect you. Bruce Lee also made a point of showing that in his movies. He was kind and respectful to people who treated him properly, and those who didn't, he broke their fucking teeth. Apply the same notion in your life and you will do better. Number 7 is in the same line. In martial arts, introspection begets wisdom. Always see contemplation of your actions as an opportunity to improve. What I've attempted to do in this video, you can contest and you can say that maybe my historical reading is not proper, or maybe I don't understand the Asian spirit. It's fine, I'm not Asian. Maybe I don't know shit. Maybe I'm just a fucking idiot. What I would like you to do is that if I'm wrong, to please observe yourself. If you are struggling in life, if you have espoused the black pill, if you have given up, look at those reasons. Maybe you will come to a different conclusion than I did, but I'm certain that the way out will always be the same. The martial way, or it will be the way of the warrior. Strength is always the solution in life, always. Number 10, the true essence of the martial way can only be realized through experience. Knowing this, learn never to fear its demand. It can be challenging to change yourself if the evolution is going to require some degree of pain. But understand that the pain of the cure will always be worth it compared to the pain of the sickness, because the pain of the sickness will last forever. The pain of the change, the pain of the remedy will only last a few months or a few years, and then you will be fixed forever. 11. Always remember, in martial arts, the rewards of a confident and grateful heart are truly abundant, and that is the key, and that is something that you must make yours. The number one thing that is missing from Asian men is confidence, at least from the people that I see in my life, in my daily experience. And that is truly a shame when you consider the fact that you descend from people and ancestors that had plenty of confidence, that saw themselves as superior to others, who had a ton of national and racial pride. I'm not afraid to say these words, all of which has been taken away from you for a reason or another. You cannot control these reasons, but you can control the action of taking back your pride. Once you take back that pride, you will become confident again. And keep in mind that confident people can be grateful. If you are miserable and you hate the world, you can never truly be grateful, because what do you have to be grateful for? But if you can summon that strength into your heart, then you will understand that you have plenty of things to be grateful for. And that will be the key. That will be the appeasement. I think that ultimately this is the goal. I find personally that I see a lot of Asian men who are frustrated constantly on a daily basis because they hate the way they perceive themselves, but they can never quite get to a point where they can see themselves in a positive light. Once you get to that positive place in your life, then that gratefulness is going to abound, and then you will be a happy and a complete person. So these were the wise words of Mas Oyama. Remember, the black pearl festers in passivity and is destroyed by action. As long as you do nothing and you just complain, et tu te morfonds, as we say in French, nothing will change. Action will surely change your life for the better. And I know that so far, most of my examples were centered around East Asians, but if you are Indian, for example, you can also find inspiration from figures of the past. For example, the old school Indian bodybuilders, who, in my opinion, make much better role models than the Bollywood actors on PDs that are now pushed and that are now sold to you as examples of masculinity. These people only promote consumerism and they promote Western values that are not going to make you happier, because they keep propagating the same type of stereotypes that present your people as inferior. Trust me, I know exactly what people say about Indian men, and I understand that it must be extremely frustrating, especially because I know for a fact you have started to buy into that bullshit. Again, a lot of incels are Indian. A lot of Indians struggle on the dating market when they live in Western countries because they get constantly rejected by white women. I get it. Even the women from within your own tribe prefer white men, they prefer African men, and the levels of frustration that come from that is immeasurable and can truly ruin your life. But guess what? Complaining about these things and doing nothing about it is stupid, because you are creating your own misery. You are buying into these lies. You are buying into the lies of your own inferiority. And I know it's everywhere in media. Even just recently, I saw another fucking movie where there was an Indian guy and he was shy, awkward, he couldn't talk to girls. It's up to you to reject this image and to not fall into that trap. It's up to you to not become what the media wants you to be. Become your own man. Look at these bodybuilders from the past. Do you think that they struggled with confidence? These guys were pre-PEDs, they were mostly vegetarian, they had almost no equipment, and yet they built tremendous physique, but most importantly, they built a level of spirituality, a level of confidence, a level of mental strength that you must aspire to build as well. Always remember, regardless of your race, Asian or not Asian, Indian or not Indian, in your veins runs the blood of legendary warriors. Always remember that these ancestors still live through you. All of these lies that I see nowadays about our generation being doomed and this plastic in the food and our test level is crashed, bullshit. These are excuses that people tell themselves to explain why they suck. Reject all of that nonsense, connect to the wisdom of the ancestors, and make them proud. Prove to yourself that you are like them. You can do great things just like them. Because I guarantee you that none of your ancestors believed of themselves as sick men. This is a modern sickness that can be cured with ancient wisdom. But if all of these examples are a bit too ancient again for you, we have modern examples nowadays to draw from. If you look, for example, at Tommy Kono, born in Sacramento, he was actually interned in 1942 with his parents during World War II because America and Japan were at odds. So people of Japanese descent in America were sent into camps. He had a very difficult life. He was born frail and sickly. He almost died several times from asthma attacks. That's how bad his lungs were. And yet, he never quit. He was quite literally born a sick man of Asia, but he never accepted that image. He said instead, I will reinforce myself through efforts. So he turned to weightlifting, he turned to bodybuilding to strengthen himself and to strengthen his spirit. And guess what? This is what it means to never give up, and this is what it means to not buy into self-limiting beliefs. And even more relevant nowadays, we have natural bodybuilders on social media who are killing it. People who are my age or even younger who are also natural. And it goes deeper than calisthenics. You know, Asian dudes are quite good at calisthenics and are killing it also in that domain. But I also perceive that there is still a level of self-limiting belief in that, because it's this notion that, well, since Asian men can't really get super strong or super big, we're going to use the fact that we're small with low body weights to be really good at the rings or really good on pull-ups. That's fine if your heart is in it, but keep in mind that you're not limited to that. You're not limited to just skill work. You can also, if you want, develop a big and jacked physique. If you want an example, on YouTube we have Eugene Teo, who is a great bodybuilder, great natural bodybuilder with a tremendous physique. And if you want examples on Instagram, you can go follow Giraffe Bra or GPG Coaching. I'm going to put our icons there. Again, two Asian dudes with tremendous physiques. Something that, in my opinion, shoots a hole in the theory that Asian men have bad bodybuilding genetics. I think that's complete fucking nonsense. I think, again, that it is because this myth is so prevalent that Asian men don't even try because they believe, well, I'll be weak and fall forever, so what is the point? And then, of course, nothing happens because you never try to do anything, and it's your own self-destructing prophecy. These dudes prove to you that if you put in the work, you're going to get there, and if anything, they're also proving that Asian genetics are actually quite good for bodybuilding, because I think that Asian men have actually great flow. They have usually tremendously huge legs. They have great core aesthetics. They usually have good shoulder width. Yes, they're shorter on average. So what? Bodybuilding actually favors short men, so it's an advantage. And ultimately, who gives a fuck if you're not 6'6"? What matters is you and your own self-development. Again, all of that stems from the past. Europeans who would write about Asian men saying, oh, they're all small, they must all be domesticated animals. This was birthed from a perspective of people who are looking at someone who is different and trying to place themselves above them. This will always be true. This type of racial discrimination and stereotypes will always exist. It's up to you to buy into that or not. Do you see your Asian genetics as a weakness? Then it will become a weakness. If you see it as a strength, then it will become a strength. Because keep in mind that even though to me, Asian men have good potential for bodybuilding, potential is entirely worthless until you actually put in the work. So, if you're concerned by this video, if what I said actually speaks to you on some level, then hear my words. It's time to spit out the black pill, my friend, because you are not a sick man. I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.